Well, for decades, only crackpots and crazy people believed in UFOs. That's what I thought anyway. And then in recent years, it turns out that governments have been taking them seriously all along. Very seriously.
And hello everyone. I'd really like to show you this PowerPoint presentation I created a couple of years ago. I first showed this publicly for the X-Files Australia group, which you can find on Facebook, in March 2018. I then did a few other talks, then several radio interviews in different parts of the world. So notably that was with OYM Radio in Ireland, and with Chip Reichenthal in New York. And on both occasions, I spoke about the contents of this presentation. Then I remembered it even goes a little bit further. I was at the Paradigm Shift Conference here in Australia back in 2017, where I was giving a talk. And that night we did like a panel where people were able to ask us questions. And someone asked the question, will we ever see disclosure, like UFO disclosure? Will the governments ever come clean in our lifetime? So I took the question, I said yes, and briefly started to try and tell the story, but then it was interrupted by an expert of the UFO research, a so-called expert in the audience. He got up, he called me foul names, he said I was full of you-know-what, and that I didn't know what I was talking about, and it was all nonsense. And then the whole thing just collapsed and we all went to bed. But look, don't get me wrong, the Paradigm Shift is by far the best conference in Australia. It absolutely is. I'll be there again this August in 2019 giving a talk. The point is, as it turned out, I was right, and that guy's now been humiliated, because that's what this is all about. This whole presentation I want to give you is about UFO disclosure. And why am I talking about this now? Well, in case you haven't seen, it's all over the mainstream news. They're basically saying that UFOs are real, they're here, they've been tracking them, and one Pentagon official even said they've got some wreckage. Okay? Now, even though I knew this was coming, it still come as a shock, right? Because I've been waiting 20 years for this to happen, and now it's finally happening in 2019, just like I predicted it would happen way back when I did this presentation back in 2018. So anyway, the point is, I think I should record this presentation. I'm going to, put it on YouTube so people get the background story about it all. Why are we having disclosure right now? Why is it happening now? What can we expect? What's coming in the future? And so I hope to address all those topics in this presentation. So I'm going to do this like a normal presentation I would do live, where it's not scripted. I just talk off the top of my head. So bear with me. I might get some blanks occasionally, but we'll push through. I don't have the backup of having a live audience, so that's a little bit tricky because it's good to interact with the people. But anyway, we'll get through it. And then at the end of it, I'm hoping I'll put some news clippings, or actual news videos of interviews where the media have interviewed these people, even Navy pilots, and you can see for yourself. Okay. So okay, all that's out of the way. Let's go ahead. So, alien disclosure 2019 and beyond.
Ten UFO sightings caught on camera. From a UFO caught on the BBC News to a flying object dropping glowing orbs down on Earth. Join us as we take a look at 10 UFO sightings caught on camera. On July 4th, 2016, a strange light was seen hovering in the night sky over Tucson, Arizona. You can see a large white orb that blinks on and off sporadically. At the 1:20 mark, a second object appears, then flashes brightly before disappearing. Many skeptics have noted that July 4th is a common night for firework displays, but do these look like ordinary fireworks? On the 2nd of August 2016, the Malcolm W. Martin Memorial Park Facebook page uploaded this clip. It's taken from a security camera overlooking the Mississippi River and Gateway Arch in St. Louis, USA. The footage shows a glowing ball hovering in the sky for around 5 minutes. It moves about the sky erratically, disappears, then reappears in different spots. One local tried explaining the footage as headlights from cars parking in the Mississippi River overlook. What do you think, headlights or visitors from outer space? In November 2015, numerous Californian residents saw some very strange lights in the night sky. People from Reno to Los Angeles spotted a blue light flaring across the horizon. Several different pieces of footage were uploaded, each capturing the same strange blue light. Dozens of calls flooded into 911 reporting the unidentified flying object. The following morning, the US Navy issued a statement that they had been testing a ballistic missile off the coast of California. It just seems awfully convenient for the Navy to issue a statement like that. Would they really fire missiles near a heavily populated coastline completely unannounced, terrifying hundreds of residents? Bit strange. There's very little info on this piece of footage. It's supposedly taken by a couple as they flew over Poland in a commercial airliner. What their camera captured is very unusual. It appears to be a massive floating object drifting by the aeroplane. If anyone has any information on this clip or can translate what the couple is saying, please leave a comment below. On January 8, 2005, a man captured what appears to be a fleet of UFOs hovering over an unknown part of Mexico. There are 40 to 50 glowing orbs floating in the sky. Many claim the sighting to be balloons or Chinese lanterns, but when the footage zooms in, it looks as though the objects are steering themselves around each other. This footage was taken in July 2016 during a flyover of the city of Melbourne, Australia. In the background there's a strange floating shape to the right side of the city. It's a thin structure hovering in mid-air. What do you think, hovering spacecraft or a glitch in the film? This startling footage was taken in an unknown part of the Philippines in 2014. At first it's difficult to tell what's happening as the footage only shows two glowing objects on a dark background, but you can see smaller orb-like objects falling to the ground. A night vision lens is used to clarify the image, and what it captures is very striking. It's clear that this UFO is dropping numerous balls of light down on the ground. Are there any plausible explanations for this footage? In October 2014, the BBC was reporting on pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. What they inadvertently captured on film is startling. You can see above the sea of protesters between the two buildings, a flying object moves towards the right of camera. It pauses for a moment, then flies straight up at an accelerated rate. It's very hard to explain this footage as the BBC captured it live, making it impossible for anyone to tamper with or alter in any way. This piece of footage caused quite a stir amongst both the scientific and conspiracy theory communities. Taken on August 6, 1997, this hefty flying object was filmed flying over Mexico City. The community has divided almost in half on whether the footage is real or fake. Some say there are dubious digital artifacts hidden in the still frames of the clip. Others have noted that back in 1997 there were no programs available to the public powerful enough to fake this footage. Other perplexing evidence is the 12 or so witnesses from across the city that reported seeing the craft flying through the air. What do you think, real or fake? If you've got any information on this clip, leave a comment below. June 2016 in Menangle, New South Wales, Australia, up to 8 strange glowing objects were filmed flying through the sky. The footage shows these craft steadily moving to the left of screen. Then a darker, more solid looking object can be seen hovering in the sky. 2 of the glowing balls previously seen seem to fly into this hovering object.
So basically what I wanted to show there was that, first of all, we can honestly say that UFOs are real. They're unidentified flying objects, and I think there's tons of evidence to prove that. And that some of them, not all of them, but some of them are being flown by intelligent beings, and that's what we just saw there. Those 2 alien species are just 2 of 70 to 80 different species that's interacting with this planet right now. So, there's a lot of them out there. So what we need to do now is go back in time, a little bit of history lesson, because a few of you will know what the Cuban Missile Crisis is, but a lot of the young people won't know what it is, and that's understandable. It was a long time ago, before I was even born. So let's have a look at that, a short video. First is some background. So basically, it was 13 days in October 1962 where the world was literally on the brink of World War III, right? It was going to happen.
The Cuban Missile Crisis, the Cold War, October 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the moment during the Cold War when the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, came close to nuclear war. Secret communications and miscommunications which played out between the White House and the Kremlin made the crisis a unique event. After the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 by the Kennedy administration, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev reached a secret agreement with Cuban Premier Fidel Castro to place Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba to deter any further U.S. aggression. For some time, the Soviets had been sending surface-to-air anti-aircraft missiles to Cuba, but President John F. Kennedy did not protest. However, he warned that if offensive weapons were sent to Cuba, that the gravest issues would arise. On October 14, 1962, U.S. U-2 spy planes took several photos showing sites for medium-range and intermediate-range ballistic nuclear missiles under construction in Cuba. Nikita Khrushchev, who had promised not to send offensive weapons to Cuba, had been lying. To help him deal with the crisis, Kennedy assembled a team called the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, or EXCOM for short. At first, they favored bombing Cuba with debate over the scale of the attack. The president decided upon a middle course, and on October 22nd ordered a naval quarantine of Cuba, the term quarantine being used instead of blockade, as blockade assumed a state of war existed. Kennedy sent a letter to Khrushchev stating that the United States would not permit offensive weapons to be delivered to Cuba, demanding that the Soviets dismantle the missile bases and return all offensive weapons to the USSR. He also went on national television to inform the public of the crisis, in which he said, "It shall be the policy of the nation to regard any nuclear missiles launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union." On October 24th, Khrushchev responded to Kennedy describing the U.S. blockade as an act of aggression, and the Soviet ships sent to Cuba would be ordered to keep going. Some Soviet ships turned back, and others proceeded. They were stopped by the U.S. naval forces but were discovered to contain no offensive weapons. Nevertheless, U.S. reconnaissance flights over Cuba indicated the Soviet missile sites were nearing operational readiness. With no clear solution to the crisis, the U.S. forces were put at DEFCON 2. On 26 through 27 October, Khrushchev sent Kennedy a message stating that the USSR would remove missiles from Cuba in return for a promise from the United States not to invade the island. Resolution to the crisis was now looking hopeful, but later, a second letter was sent by Khrushchev which provoked debate again. It demanded that the deal would also require the removal of U.S. Jupiter missiles from Turkey. That same day, a U.S. U-2 reconnaissance jet was shot down over Cuba. Kennedy prepared for an attack on Cuba within days as they searched for any remaining diplomatic resolution. That night, Kennedy ignored Khrushchev's second message and proposed to the Soviet Union steps for the removal of Soviet missiles from Cuba under supervision of the United Nations and a guarantee that the United States would not attack Cuba. Attorney General Robert Kennedy was sent to meet secretly with the Soviet ambassador Anatoly Dobrinin and indicated that the United States were planning to remove the Jupiter missiles from Turkey anyway and within 6 months. This was to be kept top secret. The next morning on October 28th, Khrushchev issued a public statement that Soviet missiles would be dismantled and removed from Cuba. The crisis was over. The world escaped nuclear war in October 1962 largely because of the cautious natures of Kennedy and Khrushchev. In 1963, a telephone hotline was set up to give instant contact between the two leaders and a nuclear test ban treaty was signed. In 1968, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was signed, meaning the superpowers promised not to supply nuclear technology to other countries. Subscribe to see more history videos. Get Simple History of the Cold War out today.
Okay, so that's the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we really were at the brink. As you saw there, that American plane that was shot down by New World Order operatives because they wanted World War III, because war is money, okay? And it means control of the world. I won't get into that now, but suffice it to say, on that day, their plans were thwarted. Why? Because someone was watching. And who would that be? These guys. I call them the Galactic Federation. That's not what they call themselves, okay? I don't know what they call themselves, but that's what I call them. So for the purpose of this explanation, I will call them the Galactic Federation. So they're basically a group of extraterrestrials. They're made up of third-dimensional beings, but as well as interdimensional, or ED, beings from the fourth dimension and the fifth dimension. So these guys have been around for a couple of billion years longer than we have. They're really smart, they're really wise, and they are like a group of elders or a council that looks after the galaxy, okay? There's a lot of other planets with life on it in the galaxy. There's a lot of planets. There's probably in our galaxy alone, you know, they think there's about 130 billion planets. Out of that 130 billion, maybe 2 to 5% have life, but that's still a lot, okay? So these guys oversee it, oversee all those planets, and Earth is included in who they look out for. Now, this guy is Lord Sananda. A lot of people mistake him for Jesus. He's not Jesus, okay? He was never anything to do with Jesus. He is Lord Sananda. And what's his claim to fame? Well, he was arguably the first human to ascend, to become an ascended master. One of the first, okay? But he was the one that got selected to represent Earth at the Galactic Federation. So he is our spokesperson, if you like, our representative for Earth on the Galactic Federation. So we'll go back in time a little bit further to the dawn of the nuclear age, and this is what started this whole thing. So July 16, 1945, the United States detonated a nuclear bomb in the White Sands Proving Grounds. Now, what happens when you detonate a nuclear bomb is that it actually also decimates the fourth dimension. And as I've already alluded to, there's beings that live on the fourth dimension. So suddenly, their civilizations are being decimated by these nuclear bombs. So they're jumping up and down screaming. So they go to the Galactic Federation and saying, what's going on? So the Galactic Federation thought, oh, we better look into this. So what they did is they sent a fleet of scout ships to ascertain what was going on. They wanted to monitor it. They know Earth, but Earth had always been like a backwater, you know, a little hick town sort of thing. They didn't expect Earth to have the atom for a long time. But of course, you know, the humans that created the atom bomb got help from another extraterrestrial being called the Anunnaki that I won't get into now, but that's where they got the tech from for that. So this got the attention of the Galactic Federation. So they sent 12 of their ships, 3D ships. These are 3D ships. And one of them, or two of them, actually got crashed because they were struck by lightning. They were flying, monitoring the missile proving grounds just outside Roswell, New Mexico, and during a terrific storm, and they got struck by lightning. And the most famous one is this one that crashed at Roswell, which was recovered by the US. And there was another one that it was about, I think, 30 to 50 k's up the road. It skipped along the ground a bit and then embedded itself into the side of a cliff. And they also got that one as well. So these were two of the ships from the fleet that the Galactic Federation sent to find out what was going on. this guy is Kenneth Arnold. So at the same time, he managed to take a picture of these craft in flight, flying near Mount Rainier at speeds around nearly 2,000 kilometers an hour. Okay, so that was amazing. So when he contacted the local newspaper, the reporter took something Arnold said and twisted it into now the famous flying saucers. So the term flying saucers came from this event. But what Arnold was saying, he said these craft skipped along like saucers on a lake. You know, if you threw a saucer across a lake, how it skip along the water? That's what he said. But then the journalist, being a journalist, he twisted that around to call them flying saucers. But as you can see, they look nothing like saucers. They look more like a boomerang almost shape. But that's, we now know that's the actual shape of the Roswell crash and what Kenneth Arnold saw. They weren't saucers. So meanwhile, back at the Galactic Federation, the rest of the crew managed to do what they had to do, and they installed monitors, satellites and monitors, ground monitors, that could basically monitor the Earth 24/7 in real time. So now they had a dedicated channel to watch the Earth to see what was happening with these nuclear bombs. So that was in the 1940s, late 1940s, early 50s. We've been monitoring it now. Now we end up back in 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. So as the aliens are watching this, they're going, hang on, they're gonna blow each other up. That's what's going on here. So they basically decide amongst themselves, the Galactic Federation, they basically said, well, you know, there's not much we can do about it. We don't want to interfere, so we're just going to have to let them blow themselves up. And if they do that, well, we'll just start again. We'll just wipe the slate clean. We'll go down there, we'll disinfect it from all the radiation, and we'll reseed it with new life forms. That's basically what they decided. But the Earth was always earmarked to be in the Galactic Federation, but probably not for another 200, 250 years into the future, when we had evolved a bit further. So that's what their conundrum was. So we're sort of umming and ahhing, oh, what do we do? And what do you do? So it was at this point that they said, well, cut them loose. Let's cut them loose. Enter Sananda. So Sananda's in the background listening in to all this, because, you know, he didn't get much attention most of the time because they were always talking about, you know, more important sort of things. Earth was this little tucked away planet in the never never. But anyway, he puts his hand up and says, hang on, let me talk to them. Let me go down there and talk to them. So everyone turns around and go, oh, Sananda, how are you? So they said, oh, okay, yeah, well, we forgot about you, but yeah, all right, you can go down and talk to them. See what you can do, but you've only got one shot at this, you realise. If they reject it, then they're on their own. And he said, yep, no problem. So Sananda grabs two of his best buddies, who are both non-human. One is a Palladian, and one is another alien, I'm not sure what species. But he brings them along with him. They jump in a ship, they go down to Earth, and then they grab Nikita Khrushchev, who is the Premier of the Soviet Union. Then they fly over to America, and they grab President Kennedy and his brother Robert, and they take him to a neutral location. They were teleported there, okay? Because, as you'll see, to Mount Kalash. There's no doorways or windows in Mount Kalash. There's no way to get in unless you know how to teleport, right? It was designed that way. So this is a big giant mountain in the middle of Tibet, 6,700 meters high. Amazing. Apparently it's made of iron, the whole thing, and it rings like a bell every so often. That's what the locals say, so I don't know. But what's interesting, it's the only mountain on Earth that no person is allowed to climb. And it's revered by the Hindus, the Buddhists, Jains, and the Bons. All of them worship or treat this mountain as a sacred mountain. And it's a sin to basically climb it or to go anywhere near it, in fact. And obviously it's because the ancient people of this area knew what was going on there. This has always been the headquarters for the ascended masters on Earth. So some of you may have heard of Saint Germain. Saint Germain resides here inside Mount Kailash. So once you get inside, it's a beautiful palace, you know, it's jaw-dropping, and there's forests in there, and there's, you know, an artificial sun and all this sort of, it's just amazing what's in there. But so that's where Saint Germain lives, and that's sort of the headquarters, if you like, for ascended masters on Earth. So if the the Galactic Federation want to contact us, that's sort of where they would go to contact us. They wouldn't go to the White House, okay? And as I said, the Chinese government have banned all attempts to climb it. But I found this quote which was interesting. This is from the first solo climber of Mount Everest, Reinhold Messner. And he said, if we conquer this mountain, as in Mount Kailash, then we conquer something in people's souls. So I think he heard the rumours, or he knew about the rumours, and he was sort of alluding to us that that's a very special place. So special indeed, this picture has not been photoshopped. I certainly haven't done anything to it. And what's interesting, it was taken during the winter solstice on the 21st of December 2012. Just after dawn, the sun had just rose, and when the sun hit the mountain, this is what happened. So that was on the winter solstice for the Northern Hemisphere, and I just think that's amazing, personally. So what's interesting is less than 24 hours after Sananda and gang meet with Khrushchev and the Kennedys, Khrushchev turns the ships around, right? Everything is halted because he's just had a life-changing event. He's just been made to realise that we're not alone in the universe, and we are a very small, fairly insignificant part of the universe, and it's just not worth it. So that was enough for him. He went, okay, let's forget this stupid game, and he turned the ships around. And then the Kennedys agreed to pull the missiles out of Turkey. And when you're looking through the history books, the historians just go, oh yeah, they just suddenly changed their mind. And you think, why? They were literally going to push the button any second. Suddenly, within the blink of an eye, it's all off. Well, now we know why. Because Sananda and crew showed up. So they then went on a world tour. So that's Cluton on the left, the blonde guy. He's a fourth dimensional Palladian. And some of you might know him as the Blondes, the Nordics. But this is a true good guy. Some of the Nordics have gone rogue, but this guy is for real. So he's a fourth dimensional Pleiadian. Palladians exist on every single dimension from fourth dimension right up to the 11th dimension, okay? They're on all different levels of spirituality and growth. So this guy is fourth dimensional. So he can make himself solid when he's on the third dimension, no problem. Sananda in the middle, and then Krill. Krill actually stayed on with the Joint Chiefs of Staff for about, I don't know, 10 years or something. He liked it on Earth. He liked hanging out with the generals. I don't know why. And they liked him, but apparently he was a bit smelly. He had a funny smell about him. And you could smell him coming. But anyway, he's a third dimensional alien as well. So they went and, yeah, did a world tour. So they went to every single country that has nuclear weapons and gave them the spiel, as well as the Vatican and some non-nuclear nations like India and China, who have now got nuclear weapons. They also visited former presidents Hoover, Truman and Eisenhower, and as well as the Joint Chiefs of Staff in America. So what happened after this visit? Let's find out. So in '63, after the meeting with Sananda, there were signs of lessening of tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States. That's when the Cold War started to thaw, started to warm up, they started to become friends again. And in his commencement speech address, Kennedy basically said it's time to re-examine Cold War stereotypes and myths and call for a strategy of peace that would make the world safe for diversity. Now, just as a side issue, you have to understand, after World War II, there was a thing called Project Paperclip, where the Americans imported all of these Nazi scientists as well as spies, because during World War II, the Allies were impressed with the Gestapo, how efficient they were and how much better they were at spying. So they grabbed the top spies from the Nazis and they formed a new group that we know today as the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. So the Central Intelligence Agency was literally set up by ex-Nazis. And at the top of the heap was Reinhard Gehlen. This guy is a piece of work, okay? I won't go into him. But basically, to keep his job, he would run to he was a double agent. He would run to the Americans and say, oh, the Russians are going to get you. They're coming any day, right? Stay on alert. And then he'd run to the Russians and say, oh, the Americans are arming up. They're going to attack. They're going to invade. So he was playing off America against Russia. He was playing them off with each other. Purely, I think, just to keep his job. Because if there was no Cold War, he suddenly wouldn't have a job. He would be in prison for war crimes. That's the only thing that kept him out of prison, because he promised the Americans, oh, look, I've been spying on the Russians for years. I've got all this good intel. I can give you names, places, dates. So they said, all right, we'll put you to work. So if there's no Cold War, there's no war, then there's no work for Gehlen, and he'd probably go to prison. So they were made aware of this, Kennedy and Khrushchev, but they couldn't just stop the Cold War instantly, because people would know something was up. They realized that humans weren't ready to know about this whole other extraterrestrial visit and everything. They wanted to roll it out slowly to get people used to the idea. So they played along with the Cold War, but they started to thaw it, to make friends with Russia and vice versa. And that's why we see President Trump now saying he wants to be friends with Russia, because he knows it's all a scam. So two other actions that also signaled the warming in relations between the superpowers was they established a teletype, like a hotline, between the Kremlin and the White House, and they signed the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in 1963. Amazing. So then, in language very different from his inaugural address, President Kennedy told Americans in June of 1963, in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. And we all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we all are mortal. So get that little hint, we all inhabit the same small planet. That was one of the messages that he was told by Sananda. However, as I said, there was a group that were not happy about this. First of all, they had their plans for World War III thwarted, so they weren't happy about that. They spent a lot of time and money organising that. Second of all, they don't want the aliens to help us, right? Because these are the guys that control big oil, big pharma, big agri, big everything, right? The banks, you name it. They're the corrupt, human-hating elites. And they deal directly with another alien race, which I've done other videos about, called the reptilians. In particular, one reptilian that calls himself Pindar. He is like the boss of the reptilians, loosely. And that's basically who they get their orders from, right? So the Draconians, as they're known, the reptilians, their nemesis or their mortal enemy is the Galactic Federation, because the Galactic Federation are of the light and the reptilians are of the dark. And they've had battles in the past, and when they found out that Sananda had been here, especially their biggest enemy is the Pleiadians, right? They detest fourth dimensional Pleiadians. So when Pindar found out that Pluton was on Earth, he absolutely had a hissy fit. And he said, we've got to stop this by all means. And yeah, as I say there, they're basically the enemy of the average person on this planet. So we know that the New World Order still had a lot of power, because what's interesting, the three men that saved the world, literally saved the world from World War III, President Kennedy, 22nd of November 1963, it was in June, July 63 that Sananda came. In November, Kennedy was assassinated. Khrushchev, in October 64, he was ousted from his political party and he was never allowed to lead again. He ended up like living as a pauper, essentially, in Russia, you know, and dying as a pauper. And then finally, Robert Kennedy in 68, he was assassinated. So two of them were assassinated and one of them was ousted into the cold, never to be given a voice again. The three men that saved the world suddenly are gone. Isn't that interesting? And that's what Sananda thought. They sent him back to Earth because they're monitoring all this now, right? So when they find out, especially Kennedy, when he was assassinated, that was almost a straw that broke the camel's back for the Galactic Federation. But they weren't going to punish all humans for the acts of a few dirty little men, you know. So they sent Sananda back. So he's talked to them again, and that's when they signed in 68, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was signed. In another attempt to get humans to stop blowing each other up. But the Galactic Federation, they're not wise elders for nothing. They weren't convinced by this, and they didn't trust humans with nuclear weapons. And so basically, Sananda said to them, because yeah, again, they were still willing to cut Earth loose, but Sananda hadn't given up on us. So he said, look, are you willing to compromise? And they said, well, what have you got planned? What have you got in mind? And he came up with the deal, basically. And this is where this is all headed, the deal. What is the deal? It is no nuclear war for the next 50 years. If humans can prove that they can control themselves for 50 years and not have a nuclear war, we, as in the aliens, will let you into the club early. So as I said, we weren't meant to go into the club for another 200 odd years, but they've compromised and they've said, all right, we'll give you a test. If you can pass the test, we're going to let you in early. So Sananda went around to all the world leaders. He offered them the deal. He said, this is the deal. And they all agreed to it. They all went, yeah, that's a pretty good deal. And of course, the Americans said, and do we get laser weapons? And he went, no. Oh, come on, give us some laser weapons. No. Right? But they were also told, at the end of the 50 years, whether you like it or not, we're sending the ships. We're coming, right? So he was giving them pre-warning. So he's basically saying, you've got 50 years to get your populations ready for our coming. That's what it was all about. Okay. That's a 50-year plan. Disclosure at the end of the 50 years. And the 50 years is up next year, 2019, but don't forget I did this talk in 2018. So that's why I was saying next year. But I said, the 50 years ends in 2019. So we're going to see the government fessing up, Americans at least, that yes, they're here, they're real. And that's where we are right now. So the CIA, using their Mockingbird media, were basically briefed, and they were told to recruit TV and movie producers to start making films that would help people embrace and feel comfortable about aliens and UFOs. And what they wanted to do was mix some truth with some fantasy, you know, to get a good balance in the middle, because they didn't want to give the whole thing away, but then they didn't want to make it seem unrealistic either. So they sort of would give a 60-40, 40-60 sort of mix, depending on the show. So yeah, not too truthful. Right. So they recruited this guy. Who's this guy? This guy, you would know him as Gene Roddenberry. He's an ex-Air Force officer, Army pilot. He's really a real patriot. He was a decorated soldier, very gung-ho, very patriotic. He was a perfect candidate for a stooge. He had a military flying cross. He was known as a patriot. And because he could keep his mouth shut, see, that's the whole point. So Roddenberry is introduced to Sanander's crew, and it was Cluton that spent about 6 months with Roddenberry, telling him everything, you know, telling him about all Cluton's adventures in space and all the different planets he's been to and all the different alien species he's run into. And so Star Trek is Cluton Trek, really. It's his story on his starship traveling around the universe. And there's Cluton. So Cluton also has what we would call superpowers, I guess. He's got telekinesis, so he can move and manipulate physical objects with his mind. He's got clear vision, so he can do mind reading. And hands-on healing. An interesting story that came out of this is that the New World Order people sent, or the reptilians sent, an assassin to take Cluton out. And they were on their way. They just arrived at some venue where Cluton was going to address a whole bunch of people. And there was an assassin attempt. But one of the bodyguards that was there for the American generals jumped in the way and pushed him out of the way and took the bullet for Cluton. So Cluton basically ran over and put his hands over the bullet wound. The bullet just sucked out into midair and he threw it away. And then he put his hands on and they filled with light and he healed the soldier's wounds. And the soldier stood up and everyone was there with their mouth open going, oh my God, I can't believe he just did that. And, you know, good old Cluton, he was like, oh yeah, whatever, let's go. And of course they captured the baddie and they squeezed the truth out of him and found out what he was doing there. But that's a true story. And of course he could teleport. But as I say here, I don't know if he used technology or if he was actually spiritually evolved enough to do it. It's possibly he was just gifted to do it, but I can't say that for certain. But he could certainly teleport from one place to another. So the thing with Roddenberry is he was basically, after he left the military, he was set up to be a fantasy writer, sci-fi writer, and he was a hack. He wasn't any good at it. He's a pilot, right? He's not a sci-fi author, but of course he was given a lot of tips and stuff. So he basically went from being a nothing. Within 12 months, he created Star Trek, right? So Star Trek premiered in 1966 and it ran for 3 seasons. And as I said, he was a no-name writer-director and suddenly penning the most successful sci-fi franchise of all time. Because as you know, it's now gone on to all these different franchises, you know, Next Generation and Deep Space and Voyager, all these different Star Trek shows are out there now. As well as 6 television series and 13 feature films. So thank you, Cluton. And again, it was to teach people about space, what's out there, what to expect. And then other shows over the years that have been doing the same thing. One of my old favourites was Stargate SG-1. There was Mork and Mindy. Hundreds of movies, like Star Wars, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I've already said, that's based on a true event. E.T., the Extraterrestrial, Contact. And then, of course, they had to tell us about these guys. So in '83, there was a two-part television miniseries called V, and that was all about the reptilian infiltration of Earth. Then they brought out The Final Battle in '84, and then the TV series '84 to '85. And then they revamped it. They dolled it up with the latest tech and CGI, and they made an awesome version of it, one of my favorites, which was the 2009 TV series. Really, really, glossy version of it. I think it's a really good version of it. So if you're interested in V, about the reptilian agenda, try and track down V, the 2009 TV series. Another excellent series if you want to investigate the abduction, sort of examines the abduction, but more through a line breeding sort of thing. So it's not really the traumatic experience of abduction, it's more of a scientific slant on it. They were doing it from a scientific point of view. They weren't trying to traumatize humans, is what I'm trying to say. But that's another excellent series if you're into all this stuff. And yeah, it also shows how there's a group that are trying to stop disclosure. They don't want the truth getting. Then one of my favorites of all time, They Live. They Live has become a cult classic amongst us geeks that are into this, stuff, conspiracy stuff. And it's John Carpenter. All his movies are good, but this one is by far my favorite. And it's really like a documentary. So instead of repeating the lizard people story, he changed it a little bit and made them look like these ugly pizza face skull people, But as I said, one of my favorite movies. Check it out. So each president since that meeting with Sananda have been given the brief about aliens are here, they're real, and we're on a 50-year deal, right? They've all been told that. And then we get into the 80s with Ronald Reagan, and he nearly spilled the beans, okay? He was a little bit over eager to get all this out. So toward the end of his speech to the 42nd General Assembly of the United Nations in '87, Ronald Reagan said, "In our obsession with antagonism at the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from an outside of this world. And yet I ask, is not an alien force already among us?" Now, if that's not in your face, I don't know what is. The Vatican have got in on the act. They brought this book out, Ex Vaticana, the Catholic Church. They've got plans to use the extraterrestrials as a saviour, right? And so they're trying to usurp all the other religions by getting in on the ground floor. They know that their other church is a scam. And so they're going to try and, weasel their way into the Galactic Federation and use them as a new religion. But of course, the Galactic Federation are not interested in that whatsoever. But that's what the Church, the Vatican, think they're going to do. And so Pope Francis basically announced he's calling them his space brothers. It's what I call sucking up to them, but it ain't going to work. He's a globalist. So there was a poll done in 2014 of 2,000 people, 1,500 adults, 500 children in England. And basically what it showed back in 2014, the belief in aliens was 51% in adults and 64% in children. It's the children they're trying to educate, because it was the children that are going to be the adults come 2019 and beyond, right? So that's really who they're trying to influence with this slow disclosure program. So in 63, the general public had almost no interest or acceptance that aliens were anything but science fiction. To now 2014, we got 64% of children believing in them, believing that they're real. So then, we got the Sci-Fi Channel that's pumping away 24/7, as well as books, movies, TV programs, you name it. We're inundated now with the whole alien agenda thing, right? And that's part of this program, to get people used to the idea. Because where they want to go to is they want, at least for children, to be 80-85% belief with children, and they're willing to accept 65 to 70% in adults by 2019. And when you look back at it now, if aliens were to land tomorrow, most people wouldn't be that phased, I don't think. They'd be surprised. Some people would absolutely have conniptions, but, I'm talking about the majority of people. So, is disclosure guaranteed? And remember, I was asking this question in 2018. No, it's not guaranteed, as I said back then, because we've got this New World Order, these Satanists that are trying to stop this from happening. But now the cat is out of the bag. It's too late. We won. So as I'm just saying there's powerful forces on Earth, both human and alien, that do not want to see. And that's why they're pushing for nuclear war. So back then, this is before Trump came along, they were trying to push North Korea into a nuclear war. They were itching for it. And now they're still itching for one in Iran, okay? But we know that President Trump is aware of this alien agenda thing, this deal. He loves deals. And that's why at his inauguration speech, he announced that, we're going to go to the stars. We're going to open up technology. He was trying to tell us then, he knows about this and he's going to make sure it happens because he knows it's going to happen on his watch. I'm going to include just that section of his inauguration speech at the end of this, so you can see for yourself. But don't forget, he also created the Space Force. And everyone, even his own team, was saying, where's that coming from? Space Force? Because you've got the Marines and the Air Force and the Army and Coast Guard. He's creating a Space Force. Well, obviously, Trump is used to running big organizations, right? And he knew that he needed an organization that was dedicated to space to facilitate this exchange program, because that's essentially what's coming, an exchange program where they're going to exchange technology and knowledge with us. So he needs someone to facilitate that. Makes perfect sense in my mind. So that's why he announced he's creating a Space Force. But what are these other idiots going to do? They're not going to just take this lying down. That's why they hate Trump so much, right? Why they continually, the media continually bash him, because they're all part of this New World Order, this cabal, whatever you want to call them, deep state, that don't want this to happen. And why is that? Because they have been planning something since 1983. And I've known about it for a long time. And it's called Project Bluebeam. So Bluebeam is a globalist attempt to stop the alien disclosure. There's, the aliens coming, and snatch control of the Earth. That's what they want to do. So basically what they've been setting up is these space-based satellites that can project holograms, and then using the 5G network, basically beam this around the world, So you're going to see all sorts of crazy stuff, right? Everything from bad aliens to monsters to ghosts to Jesus, you name it. And you're going to hear their voices in your head, and I'll explain how that works. So they started off just softly by introducing the concept that aliens are bad and that they're all coming to invade the earth, right? To plant that seed in your mind that if you see a big giant ship in the sky, it's probably not good. It's probably going to invade us. Or with the Christians, they said Jesus is coming, second coming, right? So Independence Day, Attack of the Block, Transformers, Pacific Rim, Avengers. And it's designed to give you a feeling of hopelessness. That's what they want. Because then it's easier for them to carry out their stuff. And as I said, fundamentalist religious groups, end times. So what they want to do is a big gigantic light and sound show. They use what we call now 7D optical holograms and sounds, laser projections of multiple holographic images in different parts of the world, each receiving a different image according to its predetermined original national religious faith. Meaning, if you're in the United States, you'll see Jesus. If you're in India, you'll see Ganesh, a Hindu god. In the Middle East, you'll see Muhammad or some sort of God, and the Jews will see Abraham. So depending on where you live, that's what you're going to see. And this God image will talk to people, not like a booming voice from the sky, because they use the 5G. It'll be beamed directly into your head, so you're going to feel like God is talking directly to you in your head, and he's going to say to you, "Follow me, children. All the aliens are bad." And so that's when they'll up the ante. The next phase is when they start bringing in the holograms of the invading ships, basically, and the hostile aliens are coming. They're going to use that to try and force nuclear capable countries of launching nuclear weapons, right? So they start a nuclear war. But then they've got controls where they can essentially overtake all the nuclear weapons and hold them to ransom. But they'll put it under the proviso of they're protecting the planet, the saviors. But they're really trying to take control of the whole planet. Now, they'll also trick the Christians that think it's some sort of rapture is occurring. So because these people will run outside and they're all going to be sucked up into the air. But what's waiting for them is not a light ship, it's a 3D man-made ship that's going to grind them up and spray them back onto the earth. So just like in the movie War of the Worlds 2005, they were telling us then what they had planned, okay? And of course, the smart technology. This is their final piece of the puzzle. They waited this long until they perfected it. And why is it in 2019 there's a sudden push worldwide to get 5G rolled out? Why is there such an urgency? Why in the American Congress are they saying to Trump, oh, we've got to get the 5G because China's going to get it before us. We've got to compete. We've got to beat them to the punch. Right? It's because it's the final piece of the puzzle for Project Bluebeam. 5G will be able to mimic supernatural forces. So the fake forces travel through the fiber optic cables, the coaxial cables, electrical telephone lines, Wi-Fi, in order to penetrate all electronic equipment and appliances that will by then have a special microchip installed, smart technology. People will believe either demons or bad aliens, depending on their faith, have occupied every corner of the earth and they're coming to get them. The other thing in America they've got is this extra low frequency and very extra low frequency called Gwen, which is a ground wave emergency network. They're also going to use that in the country areas that don't have the 5G and as much technology. They'll use this Gwen system. And as I said, they can beam voices directly into your brain, into your head. And the other thing they do with the Facebook, the Twitter, the LinkedIn, and all those sorts of things, they can get a full data workout of you. They can capture all your data so they know who your friends are, what your likes are, what books you read, what movies you watch, what TV shows you watch, what foods you eat, you know, through those other apps that are all the craze now, those menu log and all those sort of things where you can just use your phone to, you know, order some takeaway from somewhere. All that's being captured. So they know absolutely everything about you, everything, right? So they can tailor these individual personalized messages just for you, and you're going to hear this stuff in your head, and you're going to think, only God would know that about me. These are all my deepest, darkest secrets. Even my friends don't know about that. Well, it must be God, or it must be supernatural, right? That's why they've been doing the Facebook and all that sort of stuff, right? Preparing for this. So the goal of this step is basically the materialization of satanic ghosts and poltergeists and evil aliens all across the globe, because they want to scare the big Jesus out of everyone. That's what they want to do. And why would they want to do that? Well, first of all, a lot of people do suicide, which suits them. And they want to create like a permanent psychological disorder. And it's what we talk about when we're talking about satanic ritual abuse, basically, where they brainwash these people through ritual abuse. It's a similar thing to that. And because what they'll do is they'll present themselves as the saviors. So what will happen at the critical time where people are just about to completely explode, the head's going to blow up, they'll come in helicopters and tanks and pretend to be fighting the aliens, and then they'll just all disappear. They'll be the saviors, and then they'll say, look, so this never happens again, you have to trust in us. Let us take over. Let us show you the way, right? That's where it's all headed to. That's what they want to do. And now they've got a compliant population that have been traumatized, so they're easy to manipulate then. Because all they have to do is say, oh, our radars have picked up another alien force that's coming, right? And everyone's just going to start shaking and go, yeah, okay, you can take all our rights away. Sure. And that's sort of what I'm going on about here, that they're going to bring in a new Messiah, and we know the new Messiah is called Lucifer. If you don't believe me, look it up. So obviously they would have had to do some testing. They're not just going to do this, you know, dry, first go and hope in hell it works. So no, test it. So we really became aware of this in December 2009 with that spiral over Norway. It was really big, 250 kilometers wide, and spun at a rapid rate. And more of these spirals showed up in Sweden, Norway, and Finland.
On April 15th, 2012, 90,000 fans at the Coachella Valley Music Festival got an epic show by rap legends Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. Dre brought together the hip-hop elite of the past 20 years.
Just for you, Coachella, coming.
Eminem, 50 Cent, Kendrick Lamar, and Wiz Khalifa ignited the crowd as they took the stage one after another. But Dre brought them one performance that truly blew their minds. He brought the late rap legend Tupac Shakur on stage in virtual form for a live original performance. The crowd went insane. What was this illusion? It looked, moved, and sounded exactly like Tupac. It was a virtual performer, an incredibly realistic computer-generated likeness of Tupac, exquisitely crafted in the man's image. On that stage, and in the weeks that followed, Virtual Tupac rocked the world. In the first 48 hours after the show, YouTube videos of the live performance amassed 15 million views. The global media ran with the story across the US, from South Africa to Canada, Australia to Ireland, and everywhere in between. The Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Billboard, the Daily Mail, Business Week, LA Times, CNN, ABC, CBS, Ad Age, Forbes. There were thousands of print, online, broadcast, and radio stories.
The most talked about performance of the night was a hologram of their deceased friend Tupac Shakur.
Google search results for Tupac hologram shot up over 50 million in 2 weeks. On April 22nd, Tupac appeared at Dre and Snoop's second show, and results of a different kind began to emerge. Tupac album sales increased more than 500% in a week. His greatest hits album made the Billboard 200 for the first time in 12 years. Downloads of his song Hail Mary saw a 1,000% gain in a week. Visits to the Tupac website rose by 500%. Hollywood studio Digital Domain, which created the virtual likeness of Tupac, saw a 2,700% increase in the volume of trading of its stock in the days after the show. Its share price rose 60% in the weeks following. Headlines changed from "Did you see it?" to "What does this mean?" in worlds as diverse as music and performance, technology, intellectual property, and ethics. The door was opened. When Virtual Tupac grabbed the spotlight at Coachella, he took a step for virtual performers as a new form of entertainment on the world stage.
There's more. 2015, we saw a floating city appeared over China. What's all that about? Well, there it is. Seen by millions of people. So, as I always ask, is Project Bluebeam guaranteed? What do you think? No, it's not guaranteed. Why? Because now we know about it. And the more people we tell about it, the more you share this video around, right, the more people are going to know what to expect and what's coming. So that in itself may stop it from ever happening, because they'll think, well, the jig is up, you know, we better go back to plan B. And as I like to remind people at my talks that come and see me, I say to them, you are now the go-to people, the people that listen to this and learn from this. You become the go-to people in your family, in your community, amongst your social groups, because when the shit hits the fan, who are they going to come to? They're going to come to you, because they know you're into all this stuff. So they might dismiss you now, and they might make jokes and say, oh, you're crazy, that's all conspiracy theory, blah, blah, blah. What if it happens? Who are they going to run to? I can guarantee you, you're the first person they're going to run to. So take this on board, get it out there. If you're wrong, no harm done. But if this happens and you did nothing, cataclysmic. So obviously we need to ask ourselves, now we know what the fake alien landing is going to look like, what would the real one look like? How are we going to know the difference? Good question. Well, first of all, don't forget, I was doing this in 2018. And I was saying, don't wait till New Year's Eve 2018, 2019 and expect a big dazzling light show, because that's not going to happen, okay? And it didn't happen. Like I said, it wouldn't happen. Because there's going to be people that are still easily spooked. And the last thing, these are benevolent, loving beings. They do not want to traumatize us. But sometime during 2019, 2020, we'll start to hear reports of lights in the sky at night, flying low, in formation, more and more and more, right? It'll become almost to the stage where when you see a big jumbo jet fly over, you don't stop in the street and point at the sky and go, oh my God, there's a jumbo jet. People just keep walking. They just keep going about their business. They almost want to get to that stage where these sightings become so blasé that they'll be ready for the next phase, and that's landing. They're not going to land on the White House lawn or at Buckingham Palace. They're going to land in the suburbs with the people. They know who the real people are, right? They know who they want to connect with. They know that all these politicians are liars and can't be trusted, right? So the first contact they're going to make will be with spiritual people out in the suburbs or in nature, you know, in the rural areas initially. So those initial contacts will be made there. And then they'll slowly start to show up over cities and things like that and make their way up to the politicians and whatnot. So that's basically how it's going to happen. So there's going to be a lot of different smaller scout ships that will come first. We're already seeing that. That's what the Navy are tracking at the moment, you know, that are admitting to. And these orbs that you see everywhere, they're like monitoring craft. They're not manned, they're drones, but they're taking, they're monitoring the air quality and everything else, temperatures, whatnot, all that stuff, until you'll see the really big ones come. And when I say big, they're really big. Couple of miles or, you know, kilometre across. They're whoppers. So there's no denying it. There's no chance someone's going to say, oh, that's a weather balloon or that's a, you know, Chinese lantern. That's not going to happen. And that's what a Palladian light ship looks like, for example. So they're big, they're bold, and they're beautiful. You can't miss them. So when you got one of them in the atmosphere, that thing there is probably about, I think it's about 30 kilometers across. So what's that, 15 miles across? But that's a mothership. They don't often land. They send out the smaller ones. That'll be in orbit. But you would be able to see that with the naked eye. It's pretty big, right? But that's what they look like. Draconian ships do not glow like that. They've got an ugly greenish glow to them, sometimes an orangey yellow one. That picture doesn't do that justice, to be honest. And of course, it's not going to be a one single species invasion like you see on Independence Day, right? There's 80 odd different species in the club. So you're going to see representatives from every single planet that's in the club, you know, to welcome us in. So they're going to be short, tall, fat, skinny, you name it. They're all going to be different. Most of them will have a Palladian humanoid with them that will come out first so it doesn't freak people out, and then he'll introduce themselves, or there's women as well. They'll introduce themselves and they're talking English with their mouth, not through telepathy, and they'll say, okay, we're here and I'd like to introduce you to some of my friends. Don't be afraid, they look a bit different to you or I, and then they'll come out, right? And of course they have a nice, calm, loving energy where, you know, the Draconians and the Greys, they don't have a nice, calm energy. And then, yeah, there'll be three waves. The first wave is the 3D aliens, then the 4Ds and the 5Ds will eventually come. And yes, for the record, there are no large reptilian species in the Federation. So if you see a big lizard man, run the other way. So now we come into what I term as the learning years. So once all the formalities and the hoopla is over, and everything will just return back to normal, okay? You'll still go to your job, you'll still get up in the morning and do what you normally do, because it's going to be a slow transfer of knowledge. The last thing they want to do is dump all this stuff on us and then just go away. That's not going to happen. So they're going to select the brightest scientists and engineers and doctors and everything like that, chemistry, engineering, cosmology, you name it, and they're going to retrain them. So basically the PhDs are going to have to go back to school again. And same with doctors and nurses, because doctors and nurses will no longer be using big pharma. They'll be using holistic methods, crystals, and they've got machines that can literally heal any single ailment in humans, anything, you name it, that can also keep humans in a perpetual state of a 30-year-old body, right? There'll be no such thing as aging if you don't want it to, right? Some people might want to just grow old gracefully. They can. But if you don't want to, you can go into these regeneration machines and you'll get a new body once a year, you know, sort of thing. So it's quite amazing the technology got. So doctors and nurses and whatnot have got to be retrained in those things. So that takes time. And then they're also going to train people in pollution cleanup, revegetation, animal husbandry, species renewal, which is bringing endangered species back from the brink of extinction, and a whole lot of other environmental things, as well as the free energy technology, right? So there's no use for oil anymore, no use for money anymore. All the things that the globalist New World Order people have built up around us, all that's going to be stripped away, and we're going to go back to our default state. And our default state is living in harmony with the planet, not using the planet to profit from. That's a lizard mentality, okay? No more lizards. They're all being taken out. They'll be gone for good. Yeah, I was going to mention there was a report came out that said that there's 30,000 light ships have entered the solar system. There's a massive Stargate basically behind the sun that they use to come in, and the reptilians set up a artificial wormhole, and they've shut that down, and the 30,000 light ships are supposed to be coming to Earth by early July. Look, don't quote me on that. I don't know. That's just rumors at this stage. But partly the reasoning is because the Palladians were pissed off about this 5G business, because they basically said it's an extinction level event. They're not too concerned about the humans, but their main concern is the other million species that inhabit this planet. And they said, we're here to protect this planet, and we've got to protect that million species. So that was what they're saying. That was like the straw that broke the camel's back. That's when they said, right, that's it. We're coming. We're taking the lizards out. They're gone. We're not putting up with them anymore. We're going to dismantle all of their control grid that they built around the Earth. And we're going to dismantle all their technologies and stuff. And we're just going to get rid of them. We've had enough. And, you know, given that all this is happening quite quickly, this disclosure where they're talking about it on the media, is interesting, the timing. And of course, on the 2nd of July is a major, the biggest solar eclipse of the year, the biggest astrological event of the year is happening on the 2nd of July. So I'm certainly going to be paying attention to that. Can't promise anything, but it's still worth watching out for. So they're also going to teach us how to mass produce food ecologically, right? And updating the history. So all the children and adults will be taught the true history of the planet, because at least for the last 5,000 years, humans have been fed a whole bunch of bullshit. And that's sorry, but that's the only way I can explain it, right? It's nonsense, the history lessons that you people have got. So everyone's going to get the true history. And the thing is, the real history of everything, the whole universe, is recorded in the Akashic records. And some of you will know what that is. Others, you might need to look that up. But the Akashic records literally record every single event. Even if it's a fly on a pond, it's recorded, right? So they've got these devices, and I've seen one of them. It looks like a crystal, but it's in the shape of an iPad. And when it's not on, it's just like a clear quartz crystal. But when it comes on, suddenly a movie appears inside the crystal. So it's like watching a little TV screen sort of thing. And you can fast forward, you know, rewind, pause, play, jump, you know, all that stuff. But what you're looking at is history. It's not a movie, it's a history, the real life history of the Earth. So all the teachers are going to be re-taught how to teach this new history. But don't forget too, all the children that are being born now, they've all come on purpose at this time. These are what we call the crystal children, right? They're really, really old souls. So by the time the learning years are over, they're going to be adults, and they're going to be the ones that are going to take the Earth into the golden age, basically, the 1,000 years of peace and prosperity, right? So that's why they're being born now, and for the last sort of 10 years or so, these crystal children. So they're all going to get the good education that we never got. But then the final job, which I think for me is the best one of all, because a lot of people are sitting there probably thinking, oh, look, I'm just a dirty old housewife. I got no skills. I got nothing. Or I'm just a dirty old factory worker. You know, I work with my mates every day and we have a good time, but I'm not good at any of this stuff. Stop it. Stop that right now. The Galactic Federation are not interested in George Soros or Hillary Clinton type people, okay? They're just not. What they want is spiritually awakened people. So you can be a housewife or you can be a factory worker, but if you meditate every day and you raise your vibration, that's who they want. That's who they want to be ambassadors, and you will get to go and visit all the other planets in the Federation, and there's a lot of them, because they need to introduce humanity as the new members of the Federation. Ta-da, here they are. And you would go there, you'd meet the other inhabitants of other planets, you'd share information with them, but all the other inhabitants in the Federation are all spiritually aware people. So if they send someone with a low vibration, they'd turn away from them. They wouldn't want to know about them. And a lot of that can be said for scientists. You know, not that scientists are evil, they're not, but they're just not spiritually aware. So what they want as the first initial contact is people that are spiritually aware. So it doesn't matter what job or you do or don't have. That doesn't matter. It doesn't come into their thinking. They want someone who is going to exude a calm, loving energy. And anyone is capable of doing that as long as you meditate regularly. Okay? So concentrate on meditating. Don't concentrate on getting a PhD in astrophysics, because that's going to be worthless, right? Concentrate. Meditating. And so after all this, that's when we'll finally have world peace, as I alluded to, right? World peace for the first time ever. No more lizard people. No more New World Order. No more cabal or deep state. Only a world of truth, no more lies. And as I've already said, it's going to be a slow process because they just don't want to overwhelm us with everything. And the other thing is they want to teach us how the technology works. They don't just want to slap something down and walk away, because what if it breaks? We won't know how to fix it. So they've got to teach our engineers how to build them, how it works, and how to fix them. Okay, so it's a long process. Deliberately, they're doing it as a long process. So they want us to understand it. And because that's what being in the Federation is all about. It's about sharing the wealth, sharing the bounty, passing on the knowledge, and caring for every living being in the universe. Right? That's what you have to focus on. No more selfishness, no more hoarding things, you know, or grabbing stuff for profit. All that's gone. It's all about sharing, sharing, sharing. So ask yourself, are you ready? Are you ready to take the next leap? If you're not sure, prepare. How do you prepare? Well, I just happen to have written a book on how to prepare. And I give you demonstrations on how to do a meditation, how to meditate, how to raise your vibration. And no, this is not some plug, you know, cheap shot plug for a book. It's because I've written this information because I knew this was coming. I said in 2017, I first started telling people publicly, expect 2019. That's when it's going to start. And it started. So I'm telling you, you know, that's why I wrote the book. And for the record, I get about, I think it's $4.60 from every book I sell for $20 online. So there you go. I'm not going to become a millionaire from selling books, trust me. I'd rather just people, I could sell this for $50, but I don't want to. I want people to buy it so they can afford it, okay? Okay, and that basically concludes the presentation. What's coming up next will be a few videos of mainstream media talking to officials from the Pentagon and DOD and pilots, and I'll also include that President Trump one, just a small section of that at the very end. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Well, you may not have heard about this, since apparently it's not a big news story somehow, but UFOs turn out to be real. We're not kidding. Recently, the New York Times profiled a secret $22 million Pentagon program that investigated unidentified flying objects. Doesn't mean they're from outer space, but they're not identified, and they're flying, and they're objects. The program wasn't bogus. Investigators found multiple aircraft encounters they could not explain, and they've even been storing metal alloy recovered from the vicinity of these encounters. Leslie Kean wrote about this in the New York Times, that piece in question, and she also wrote a book called UFO Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. She spent years investigating UFOs with the support of former Bill Clinton Chief of Staff, by the way, John Podesta. Leslie Kean joins us tonight. Leslie, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
So that piece, I think, vindicated a lot of work that you've been doing for an awfully long time, and certainly got my attention, and I've stopped making fun of people like you and started paying attention. This seems like a huge story. So I know that it's vast and hard to sum up, but if you could just briskly tell us what we think we know about these sightings.
Well, we do know that there are objects in the sky and sometimes in the water that demonstrate extraordinary capabilities that experts say we don't have on this planet. We don't have the capability of creating the kind of technology or apparent technology that's been observed by high-level officials for many, many decades. The Pentagon program is the most recent discovery, but these things have been studied in other countries and by our country for many years.
So what percentage of these sightings are we sure are not weather phenomena or experimental aircraft?
Well, that's a really good question, because most sightings of UFOs that just people report are identifiable. I mean, we're talking about maybe 5 to 10% of all the sightings that are called in are not explainable. And the ones that are really of interest are the ones reported by military pilots, by commercial pilots, by trained observers, multiple witnesses, ones that are caught on radar, events that have a lot of data to support them and involve very, very credible people.
So I guess what bothers me most about this story is how clearly people who should have been following up and paying attention haven't been. And the case that sticks with me, November 7th, I think, 2006, at Chicago O'Hare Airport, 4:15 in the afternoon, gate C-25, I believe. The pilot of the plane waiting to depart to Charlotte looks up, and there is a saucer hovering not that far over the plane. People in the tower see it, other pilots see it, dozens of people see it. It's real, and the FAA refuses to investigate. How could that be?
I know, it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking to me. I mean, they refuse to investigate, I think because who knows what the bigger reason probably is that they can't explain these things, and they just they don't want to deal with them. It might frighten people. They don't have enough information. They don't like to say, well, there's something hovering above an airport, but we don't know what it was. So basically, they will come up with other explanations for it, such as that it was a weather phenomenon. That's what the FAA said about O'Hare, which is really an insult to the pilots who witnessed this thing and many other observers who know that it wasn't weather. I mean, it was a metallic-looking disc-shaped object that hovered over as you said, hovered over a terminal, gate C-17 for about 5 minutes, and then it shot straight up through the clouds. This was an incredible aspect of the thing. It was hovering below a cloud bank, and all of a sudden it just shot straight up really fast through the cloud bank and cut a hole in it. So there was like a cookie cutter clean hole in the clouds. You could look up and see the blue on the other side. And as far as anybody knows, as far as I know, and from what I've been told, we don't have machines in the sky that can do things like that.
But I mean, this is not a potato field in Maine in the 1950s at 3 in the morning. This is Chicago O'Hare, one of the busiest airports in the world, in the middle of the day, in front of sober witnesses, including pilots and the control tower. And the FAA says we're not that interested? Like, how could that be?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's very bad. I appreciate how baffled you are, Tucker, because I'm baffled too. And you can imagine that the witnesses involved with this, it's an insult to them. I mean, there are many witnesses, and we're talking about military people, high-level people in the Air Force, the Navy, the other military commercial pilots who are just told that we're not interested in what they saw. And it's very difficult for a lot of them because they're patriotic people.
Well, yeah, I mean, what if it's the Chinese military? I mean, I believe you because you are, I think, the preeminent researcher on this question, but it beggars belief that the U.S. government would just sort of let it go. Anyway, I appreciate it. Leslie, thank you for coming on. It's an honor to have you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker. I appreciate your interest in this. Thank you.
Thanks a million. UFOs have been the stuff of conspiracy theorists for decades, often mocked for talking about it, but maybe they shouldn't be mocked. Commander David Fravor spent 18 years as a naval aviator, a pilot. In 2004, he had an unforgettable encounter with an aircraft he said was defying the laws of physics. Former Commander Fravor joins us tonight. Thanks a lot for coming on tonight. Tell us what you saw.
Well, we had launched on a routine training mission. When we joined up, we were told that the event was going to be canceled and that we had real-world tasking. and we were sent out to the west. Now, take in mind that this has taken place about 100 miles southwest of San Diego, between San Diego and Ensenada, Mexico, on a clear, perfect day, blue waters. We get out to the spot where they tell us it's at. We start looking around, and both airplanes see a disturbance in the water and a white 40-foot long tic-tac shaped object just hovering above the water, going forward, back, left, right. There's no rotor wash, there's no wings, nothing. So as we drive around in a clockwise flow, we get to about the 9 o'clock position, and I said, well, I'm going to go down and check it out, and the other jet is going to stay high. So as we go down, when we get to the 12 o'clock position, it starts to mirror us. So it's in a clockwise flow, and it's on the opposite side of the circle from us. And we continue this. It's in a climb, we're in a descent, we're getting a great look at it. This whole thing takes about probably up to 5 minutes from the time we show up. I get over to the 8 o'clock position, it's at about the 2 o'clock position, and I decide I'm going to go and see what it is, and it's about 2,000 feet below me. And I cut across the circle, and as I get within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerates to the south in about 2 seconds and disappears.
What would you estimate the speed?
Oh, well above supersonic. It like a bullet out of a gun, it took off.
So from what you know about aerodynamics, mechanics, physics, should this be possible, what you saw?
Not with the technology that we have today. Not at all.
Even now, even 13 years later, is there anything that you know of capable of this kind of behavior?
No, there's nothing I know of. I mean, when we saw the video with the IR, it has no exhaust, no discernible things of anything form of propulsion. And this thing came from a dead hover over the water, just kind of moving around, to a climb up to about 12,000 feet to rapidly accelerating away in a climb, and in less than 2 seconds it was gone. And you figure you're talking 50 miles of visibility, and you can easily see an object that size easily out to 10 miles, and it just disappeared in seconds.
What would be the effects on a human pilot of the G-forces involved in that altitude change?
Well, the altitude wouldn't be bad. It would be the acceleration of the object.
That's right.
Honestly, I wanted to fly it.
Yeah,
but, I bet. Talking to some physicists, they don't think the human body could handle that kind of force with that acceleration.
It doesn't sound like the human body could. So bottom line, what do you think this was?
I believe, as do the other folks that were on the flight when we visually saw it, that it was something not from this world.
When presumably you expressed that belief to your superiors, what did they say?
Actually, we caught a lot of grief getting back to the boat, and it got passed off as an event that no one could explain. Now, keep in mind, they had been tracking these for 2 weeks prior to us seeing it, and this was the first time that manned airplanes had been airborne when the objects appeared.
This feels like a really big story to me. It's not exactly clear why Vladimir Putin's more interesting than this. I think this seems like a big deal. And Commander, I appreciate your taking the time to talk to us about it. You seem sober and believable, and
Commander David
I appreciate
Fravor
it.
still can't explain what he says he saw that day. November 2004, the Navy fighter pilot was on a training mission west of San Diego when he was ordered to check out something in the water not far away. On a clear day, over a smooth ocean, he saw the object, waves breaking over it, and says he saw something hovering above it.
It's randomly moving north, south, east, west, just random, just stopping, going the other direction, like you could do with a helicopter, but a little bit more abrupt. It looks like a 40-foot-long tic-tac with no wings.
Fravor says he and his four-man team tracked the object for several minutes until it just disappeared. Tonight, CNN has learned the Pentagon had a secretive program to research UFOs like the one Fravor spotted. The project was called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, run by an official named Luis Elizondo.
I think this is a national security imperative. We have clear things that we do not understand how they work, operating in areas that we can't control.
A defense official tells CNN the program cost at least $22 million over 5 years before it was shut down in 2012. According to the New York Times and Politico, which first reported this story, tens of millions of dollars for the project were pushed through by former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Those publications say a lot of the money for the Pentagon UFO program went to a company called Bigelow Aerospace, run by a longtime friend of Reed's, Robert Bigelow, a big believer in UFOs. Public records show Bigelow contributed about $20,000 to Reed and his political action committee.
That campaign contributor got research contracts from this program. That just is a bad picture. It doesn't look good for anybody. It's hard to imagine that something that came about that way and profited somebody who pushed for the program was a good use of taxpayer money.
A Pentagon spokesman, in fact, told CNN the program was shuttered because there were, quote, other higher priority issues that merited funding.
It's definitely crazy to spend $22 million to research UFOs. Pilots are always going to see things that they can't identify, and we should probably look into them. But to identify them as UFOs, to target UFOs to research, that is not the priority we have as a national security matter right now.
But pilots like Fravor, who says he saw something, see merits in the program.
What if it is real? Because I think it's real because I saw it. And what if there's more of these? And what if we do nothing?
Now, just a short time ago, Senator Reed responded to CNN saying he's, quote, proud of this program and its groundbreaking studies. Speak for themselves, he says. Reed says it's silly and counterproductive to politicize the serious questions raised by the work of the UFO program. The head of that aerospace firm, Robert Bigelow, did not respond to CNN's multiple requests for comment by our deadline. Wolf?
Brian, there's also information that former Senator Reed tried to keep information about this entire program out of public view.
That's right, Wolf. The New York Times says Reed acknowledged to them that he and two other senators, Ted Stevens and Daniel Inouye, both deceased, did not want public debate on the Senate floor over this program. Reed told the Times that the funding for the project was so-called black money, meaning that was secret money for classified programs. They just didn't want it talked about.
Well, for many, many decades, the U.S. government has dismissed out-of-hand UFO sightings as crank stuff, things that lunatics babble about. Now, suddenly, they're taking a different approach. They are telling the truth. They're finally admitting that UFO sightings are, in fact, routine, and the government is now being systematic in investigating the question of UFOs. A new History Channel documentary called Unidentified will explore the military's many recent encounters with unidentified aircraft.
The object the Navy pilot is tracking seems to get bigger, then appears to accelerate rapidly, disappearing off screen.
That's very fast.
The object appears to perform a similar maneuver to what the pilots witnessed. Instantaneous acceleration at this rate would produce a force of gravity, or G-force, so extreme it would crush a human being.
Luis Elizondo is a former military intelligence official and special agent in charge. He joins us tonight. Luis, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker, for having me.
So the military's decided to stop lying about this. I guess the first question is, why did they lie for so many years about what they knew?
I think that's a fair question, Tucker. I think there could be multiple answers. I think, first and foremost, let's look at the obvious. We didn't have quite the technology for decades that we do now. We now have the technology on some of the most sophisticated weapon systems that give us the fidelity that we need to better ascertain what these things are. Another answer could possibly be, frankly, stigma and taboo, and that this is a topic that is fraught with these landmines, potential, if you will, proverbial landmines.
Yeah, I mean, we sent a man to the moon 50 years ago, so we've had technology for a while, and in fact, it's been more than 60 years since right after the Second World War that the U.S. military has been downplaying these reports. So over the course of that time, some of the smartest, most dedicated people in our country watching these unexplained aerial phenomena, they must have gathered quite a bit of information about UFOs. What have they learned, do you think, in all these decades?
Well, Tucker, I can only answer from the time that I was with ATIP for about 10 years when I was part of that program. And we learned a lot. I think probably the most significant, if you will, results of the program were 5 observables. And you've already mentioned a few of them on your show, and that's instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocities, a bit of an oxymoron, but low observability, transmedium travel, and last but not least, positive lift, or in the vernacular, anti-gravity.
So, I mean, there have been enough sightings over a long enough period that the idea that this is a computer glitch or that these are generated somehow by radar systems, that can't be right, correct?
Tucker, we are well beyond right now establishing whether or not these things exist. It is an absolute fact that they are there. Now, What they are, where they're from, who's behind the wheel, we simply don't know. I mean, is it possible these things are a foreign adversarial technology that somehow was developed in secret and we're just now trying to figure these things out? It's possible, but there's also other possibilities as well of what these things could be.
Right. So that would be the terrestrial explanation. Just assign off the top of your head a likelihood of that being the case, that these are Russian or Chinese.
Boy. You know, Tucker, you don't want me to give my opinion. The one thing I learned in intelligence, there's a lot. You can be absolutely sure of something and be absolutely wrong.
Of course.
So
it's happened to me many times.
You know,
but it sounds, I guess, just to sort of put a bow on it,
I think it's a low probability. I think
that's it. Okay.
It's a very low probability. Look, we have the most sophisticated weapon systems right now on the face of the planet. And we can identify not only a 737 or a MiG-25 or a F-22, we can tell you even what airline it is and the difference between the models of aircraft within that type of aircraft. So I think it's highly unlikely that a foreign adversary was successful in developing something like this.
So let me ask you one last question. Do you believe, based on your decade of serving in the U.S. government on this question, that the U.S. government has in its possession any material from one of these aircrafts?
I do, yes.
You think the U.S. government has debris from a UFO in its possession right now?
Unfortunately, Tucker, I really have to be careful of my NDA. I really can't go into a lot of more detail than that.
Okay.
But simply put, yes.
All right. Well, we have a lot more to find out. And I'm very glad that you came on our show tonight.
Are they out there?
They? Who are they?
Beings from other planets.
Oh, boy.
The New York Times just did a piece on Navy pilots who reported seeing strange objects in the sky in 2014 and in 2015.
Their accounts and others are included in a new show called Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation. Here's Lieutenant Ryan Graves describing one odd encounter.
When we talked about the visual contact, when it buzzed by, it was very likely that was stationary, and we actually buzzed by it because we didn't know it was there. So it was likely stationary at that time, and it basically split our section when they were in tack wing. So it wasn't like it was trying to merge with us or it was making high-speed passes or anything like that. It was most likely stationary. We just didn't know it was there, or this was at a time where we weren't even sure if they were real or not. Essentially, just kind of flew into it. When I say it was following us, I don't mean individual aircraft. I mean, wherever we were, they were there. So that could mean two things. That could mean they were already there, or they were following the strike group. But they weren't following individual aircraft. And of course, at this point, we're like, okay, well, clearly this is nothing that we're used to seeing out there. So we submitted a safety report saying that there was an unidentified object in our working space, and we don't know what to do.
Wow.
Wow, here with more eye-opening information is Luis Elizondo. He is a former director of a Pentagon program that has been devoted to the study of UFOs. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
I guess my first question is, are they like in the shape of flying saucers? Like, is that typically what we would see, is the classic flying saucer image, or they come in different shapes and sizes?
Actually, you're correct. They do come in different shapes and sizes. There are the classic lenticular or saucer shape, but then there are some that look like a Tic Tac, for lack of better description, and and some even are triangular. It's really rather interesting.
You have a lot of inside knowledge, and that's what this show is all about, people with inside knowledge. I think some people might be surprised to know how much money the government has spent on studying UFOs. So is it definitive then that these exist, that we're not alone, based on what you know?
Well, I have to be cautious. I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but I think the first part of your question, do these exist? I think that's been substantiated. They are absolutely real. Now, where are they from or who's behind the wheel, or we simply don't know. We don't have enough data yet. I know that's unsettling for some people, but the reality is, could this still be a foreign adversarial technology that somehow slipped through the radar? Sure, it could be. Could it be something else? Yes, it could be. We don't know, and so I wouldn't want to have any false conclusions until we have more data.
All right, Karen and I were just discussing this. Everybody thinks aliens are coming to get the Earth. Couldn't they be friendly and wanting to come in here and maybe help us and offer some alternatives to maybe medicine or advanced research? Or couldn't they be friendly people or things? I'm not qualified to answer that question. Again, that the jumping to the conclusion that we're talking about aliens or extraterrestrial life. That's a conversation I think that probably academics and some people that are more qualified to go into that territory. Keep in mind, my background was simply national security. So if there's something that's coming into our airspace or in and around our sensitive military facilities, typically, if this would be, let's say, a Russian aircraft, you would see us responding by scrambling interceptors. In this particular case, these are things flying around in our airspace and our controlled combat theaters that really do not fall neatly with within any type of category that we would consider aircraft.
Does it happen a lot?
Yeah.
I think it happens. I think you'd be surprised. It happens a lot more than you might think. And I think this program that we have coming out this Friday, Unidentified, goes into that. I think the public will be surprised the frequency this occurs.
You worked for ATIP, is that right? The organization, is that what it's called?
I did, yes, sir. That's correct. Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. It's a bit of a wordy title, but the U.S. government, we like to give long titles to things.
And you resigned, is that right as well?
I did, sir, in 2017.
And what was the reason? Because they weren't believing you? What was the reason?
Well, it's a topic fraught with taboo and stigma, and my loyalty to the Department of Defense and the Secretary has always been priority one. And I served with Secretary Mattis in a combat theater, so I regard him in the utmost highest regard. This is an incredible human being that needs information so he can make informed decisions, and the bureaucracy within the department wasn't allowing me to provide that information. So I resigned knowing that he would get my resignation letter and they wouldn't be able to stop it. By the way, which is no different than Secretary Mattis did almost a year later.
And you're thinking then, as we're going to get to see this on Friday, you can bring more information out for people to see.
I do. I'm hopeful we can finally have a collective discussion without the stigma and taboo and, the little sly giggles and thinking about tinfoil hats. This has the potential to be a national security issue.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your time and good luck with your further investigations.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Fascinating. Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation premieres Friday night at 10 o'clock right on the History Channel. For more information, you can visit history.com or set your DVRs.
I know where you'll be Friday night at 10
o'clock. I want to watch.
All right.
We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the Earth from the miseries of disease, and to harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow. A new national pride will stir our souls, lift our sights, and heal our divisions. And whether a child is born in the urban sprawl of Detroit or the windswept plains of Nebraska, they look up at the same night sky, they fill their heart with the same dreams, and they are infused with the breath of life by the same almighty Creator.